on this from your government sources?
Okay. China's been very aggressive recently in South China and Yellow Seas. We know about the incidents between the Japanese, the Chinese. The Japanese are keeping a very close eye on the Chinese Navy. The Chinese have an underground submarine base on the south coast of Hainan Island. People might recall Hainan Island from two previous incidents. In 2001, when the Navy spy plane was forced to land on Hainan Island.
Wayne, we're having cell phone problems with you. We're going to disconnect and call you back, okay?
Okay.
Are you on hands-free?
I'm not on a hands-free, no.
Okay, wait a minute. Your phone just came back. The first part, the first of what you said got cut off. I believe you said the Chinese Navy has been very aggressive lately. Your phone's now better. Recap what you just said.
Well, the Chinese Navy, people might recall two incidents off the Hainan Island, which is where an underground Chinese submarine base is located. These submarines leave underwater undetected and go back into their underground base undetected. They're not forced to surface. So we had in 2001 the Navy spy plane that had the altercation with the Chinese MiG. The U.S. Navy EP-3 Ares was forced to land on Hainan Island.
In fact, going back 9 years, didn't they even ram it?
Well, yeah, they hit it. They hit it with a MiG. And then just last year we had what's called a surface towed array surveillance system ship, U.S. Navy ship called the Impeccable, was harassed off of Hainan Island. This is a ship that detects submarines specifically in that area.
And by the way, I would add you were a Navy man first yourself.
Well, I worked in the sound surveillance system for over 7 years in both Atlantic and Pacific. I was a anti-submarine warfare officer and a certified integrated undersea surveillance system.
So you didn't just work for the NSA, you worked in anti-submarine warfare for the Navy in some of the most secret areas. B, you now have these sources in Washington, so you're a very credible source to be able to speak on this. Please continue.
Yeah, I mean, what we did with SOSUS, and I have to say, people who say we have the capability now to track submarines, well, we've curtailed that capability. We used to have a vast array of undersea acoustic hydrophones. We only have two bases left, one at Whidbey Island in Washington State, and the other at Dam Neck, Virginia, and only 5 of these CERTAS ships, one of which I mentioned was harassed by the Chinese Navy off Hainan Island last year. 5 ships to cover the entire world. Okay?
So this is going back to the Cold War, but now our country doesn't have the submarines or the ships that they did. There was constant harassment and tag and subs shadowing carriers. Our Navy SEALs going in from subs, cutting undersea cables. I mean, this has been a long-term Cold War, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I remember once when I was stationed at the SOSUS base in Coos Bay, Oregon, we actually had a Soviet Victor 3 nuclear submarine surface off the coast, 30 miles off the coast, about the same area where it's figured that this Chinese submarine may have launched this missile that actually headed northwest and probably impacted in China, just as a test and also a message to the United States. If you're going to play in our waters, in the Yellow Sea and South China Sea, guess what? We can do the same thing. I also understand that the National Security Agency may have intercepted telemetry from that Chinese missile. So they know, the Pentagon knows, the Chinese have no vested interest in having the public know. All that matters to them is that Obama knew right before he met President Hu in Seoul, and he's going to meet him again in Tokyo at the APEC conference. And that's the only people that need to know. They're happy with that situation. And I believe that, like with the incidents we had between Soviet and American submarines during the Cold War, Obama probably talked to the Chinese president and said, okay, you proved your point. Let's not exacerbate these tensions. Let's keep it quiet. And then it took a day and a half for the Pentagon to start trotting out these newly minted experts including from the Discovery Channel of all places. People that claim, it was an airplane, it was a U.S. Airways flight from Honolulu to Phoenix.
Well, Wayne, we've posted the videos in the last 3 days of former generals and experts in this saying it was a missile. So I guess those were people that they couldn't control.
Right, and so the editor of Jane's Missile publication in London stated that as far as he was concerned, it looked like a submarine-launched ballistic missile. Now, when I was in the Navy, we had a lot of intelligence sources, but you know what we used as our major reference?
Jane's is the global premier encyclopedia for all things weapons.
Absolutely. When there was a question asked, we would opt for Jane's over even our own Navy intelligence. We figured Jane's was right, and some of our intelligence may not have been correct. So with all that, and of course now we have all these so-called experts coming out of the woodwork claiming, oh no, it was a contrail from a commercial airplane. Well, anyone that looked at that knows that with the plume, very very few contrails look like that. That was actually you saw the vapor trail because that submarine was fired from underwater, so it was not on the surface. And we've seen, just take a look at some of the Polaris missile shots and look at the similarities. Now we're told, there's similar contrails off of JFK in New York and off of Florida. Well, isn't Photoshop wonderful? Because if you look at those contrails, it looks like they took the contrail from off California and superimposed it on pictures from other locations.
I mean, I'm no missile expert, but I've watched a lot of Polaris submarine launched, and the plume is a lot bigger at the bottom, and then it goes up and then off at an angle, and that's what all the experts said at the time. Now, there is a lot of Navy missile testing in the past right off the coast, and a few weeks before, they did tell the FAA that they would be doing some drills. What's your intel in Washington telling you? I mean, are you getting other intel that this was the Chinese?
Right. What you're talking about is a notice to... it's called a notice to airmen, a NOTAM. They release those periodically to say, look, it is known that the Navy or the Air Force is conducting, or NASA conducting missile tests in these areas off Wallops Island, off of Virginia, off Point Mugu, and California, in Southern California. That's just standard procedure. It's not saying that because the Navy and Air Force said that it was not any of their missile tests. They came right out in the beginning and said that. The FAA said that was not a plane that had taken off from LAX or any other airport in the area. So it took the Pentagon, like I say, a day and a half. But I would note that I see a lot of skepticism now from some of the Pentagon correspondents for the major networks like Jim Mikolajewski with NBC. I don't think he was buying it the other day when he reported that the Navy said, well, it was an airplane. But they really have no.
Okay, Wayne, let's look at the geopolitical ramifications. You have the Chinese military in the last 3 months saying they're openly getting on a war footing and are very, quote, angry at the Pentagon. You have the head of the Chinese central bank coming out and downgrading U.S. treasuries. You have the Chinese government saying it's horrible what they're doing, devaluing the dollar. You've got the Brazilian head of the finance minister, the German finance minister, the French finance minister. I mean, it's countless. It's literally scores of articles every day, official press releases. Obama is being excoriated at the G20. Meanwhile, he's doing press conferences saying, we're helping the world, everyone's happy, totally lying, just bald-faced in front of everyone. The Federal Reserve is accelerating this currency war. Herman von Rompuy has announced at the G20, nation states are dead, EU chief says. The belief that countries can stand alone is a lie and an illusion. So these offshore banks have engineered this fiat system. They've used the U.S. as one of their main bases. And now globally, the U.S. is being blamed for the private IMF and World Bank and what the 6 big banks have done. I mean, we're really being scapegoated. And if you're right, as a lot of other military sources are saying, that this was some type of missile similar to North Korea routinely firing missiles over Japan publicly to menace them. This is an incredible escalation, and it's similar to Dick Cheney during the Olympics on 8/88 and George W. Bush launching the attack on South Ossetia and Abkhazia, now confirmed, saying that Russia had done it, and launching it while they're meeting with Putin. So I guess this is and we know that now happened. So it's like a threatening brinksmanship of, you want World War III, pal? I mean, is that what you're saying the Chinese have done?
Well, I think primarily China wanted to send a message to us. Look, you keep playing in the South China Sea, and Hillary was rattling some sabers about the islands that China claims down there, the Paracel and the Spratly Islands.
Yeah, they're fighting with the Japanese over that.
And up in the Yellow Sea, there's fighting over some islands there
with Russia.
I think primarily this is the Chinese military telling the Chinese government, look, you better take a stand here, because if the U.S. thinks it can play in our waters, we have to demonstrate to them that we can play in theirs.
And let me just back up what you're saying. The Russians, day 2, rolled mobile nuke launchers into South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and the head of their Joint Chiefs of Staff went on television, pulled it up on YouTube, and said, we're preparing for nuclear war with NATO and the United States. They've launched this attack, and then suddenly all those C-130s landing with U.S. troops and mercenaries pulled out, and now we've got U.S. and other ships all around China doing these drills with Japan and South Korea. And so I guess China's saying, two can play at that game, because we know our government's been doing missile tests off the coast of China. So I guess this is just turnabout as fair play?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that primarily this was a military response by the Chinese. But I think what you said about the economic situation, this was the perfect storm to make a demonstration like that. So I think there's a lot of things that played into this decision. So the Chinese dispatch a Jin-class ballistic missile nuclear submarine. They may have one or two of those. And frankly, we also know that the previous submarines that they had of the same type, ballistic missile submarines, were very noisy. But the Chinese, being such a high-tech power, they know how to quiet these down, just like the Soviets and the Russians were able to quiet their submarines.
Well, reportedly, though, Wayne, and I mean, you were a submariner and somebody who worked on all this sonar and surveillance, but just from my research in Jane's and other places, the Chinese don't care. They'll run into channels with a bunch of traffic and routinely pop up right behind with their diesels. They just don't care. Yeah, well, they had a diesel-electric, as you mentioned, that popped up right in the middle of the U.S. Navy task group about the same time that this incident takes place. It was the USS Kitty Hawk, and the whole purpose of those task forces, the other ships are supposed to protect the aircraft carrier. So obviously we have a problem with our anti-submarine warfare detection capabilities. And also, remember, Rumsfeld's pet project, the ballistic missile defense system, Star Wars 2, they sunk billions into that. And this also shows, well, that money was wasted. So what the Pentagon's trying to do by covering this up is to protect a lot of heads from rolling. And, one thing I know about the Navy, when they screw up, they're very good at one thing. They're very good at covering up. I don't think they were very good here, because it took them a day and a half to start finding the newly minted experts. What are the other Navy people saying you're talking to on Capitol Hill? Well, some Navy sources are telling me absolutely it was a test firing of a Chinese submarine-launched ballistic missile. The Japanese intelligence are onto that, too. They've been keeping a close eye on what's happening in Hainan with the Chinese submarines. That's their conclusion, and I think we're going to see more people coming out. I think we're going to see leaks starting to filter out of the Pentagon very shortly. Because there's people